Hello, I'm Martin Edwards and I work for the Student Union Advice Team providing help and advice to students. Now, one of the main areas we advise on is student finance and money. And ever since money was invented, people have been looking at ways to get it, to manage it, and save it. And these podcasts are going to go into what finance is available to you and where you can get help if money is getting the better of you. Now, my guest today is Ralph, who is a colleague of mine and also an advisor for the student advice team at the union. Hello, Ralph.
And hello.
Would you like to tell the listener about what you do?
Well, certainly, as I have been in this job for just over 24 years now, which makes me either fiercely dedicated or a sad and ambitionless little man, depending on how you cut it. Principally, my work is in helping people to get as much money as they can out of the variegated government systems, although occasionally one does have to lower a ladder when someone has dug themselves into a hole with money. We'd far prefer people didn't dig themselves into the holes, although we are quite good at lowering ladders.
So very true. And my other guest is Aaron Phillips, who is a former postgraduate student and now an engagement coordinator for the Students' Union. Hello, Aaron.
Hello, Martin. Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. And would you like to say a little bit about yourself and perhaps what you do?
Yes, so I've been a student for, since 2014. I became student staff in the Students' Union about 3 years ago, working in advice. I went all the way up to PhD studies, so I know quite a bit about the pros and cons, especially when it comes to finance. But yeah, right now I'm an engagement coordinator, so I look after everything clubs and societies.
Thank you very much, Aaron. So, today we are looking at the finance available for postgraduate students specifically, and those would be students who are doing master's courses or PhDs, doctorate courses. We can touch upon people who are doing, say for instance, the postgraduate certificate in education, but that is a different source of funding and is more akin to undergraduate student finance. And maybe that's a good way of introducing this, Ralph. What is the chief difference between postgraduate finance and undergraduate finance?
Ooh, the chief is tricky. I would put it in two categories. Firstly, there isn't as much of it. And secondly, there's only one type of loan. Undergraduates can sometimes be very surprised to discover that instead of that nice, familiar, tuition fee loan goes to the university, don't have to worry about it. Maintenance loan for living costs, blow it on what you like, but please don't blow it before the end of term. They have one loan and one loan only, and it suddenly becomes their responsibility to set up tuition fee payments, because government ain't paying them direct. I would say that's probably the biggest.
And Aaron, I mean, from your perspective, as a student, when you were transitioning from being an undergraduate student to a postgraduate student, what would you say was the biggest change that you had to get used to?
I would say budgeting. So making sure the loan went split into paying my tuition costs, which was my responsibility, which that was a challenge in itself. But then also making what was left stretch out to the end of term. That was completely different to undergraduates, and I noticed that as you go up the ladder, so in the case of doctoral funding as well, the actual maintenance side gets lower and lower.
Yeah, that could be quite a challenge, I can imagine. Was there any help that the university supplied at the time?
There was the hardship fund, now the student support fund.
Indeed, yes.
Where obviously when I had spent my maintenance money, there was a small pot of money which I could have tapped into for emergencies only. But other than that, that was the only avenue I'd taken with regards to money.
And Ralph, anything else that you can think of whereby students, particularly perhaps students who come from undergraduate degrees at staffs, how they could be better off in terms of their finances?
Well, I think Aaron here may have sold himself just a little bit short, because as well as all those the structural things, the postgraduate finance, the Student Success Fund, there's all those hours of toilsome labour you put in for your friendly student union.
Of course.
Working for our advice team, I think you did some things for marketing as well.
I did.
Which is fairly typical of the postgraduate experience. Because at the master's level, starting this September, we're only expecting the master's funding to be around £11,800 for the course. Minus your fees, that's less than undergraduate. And for PhD students, we're only expecting it to be around £27,800 for the course. Split over 3 years. If you can do a PhD in less than 3 years, you are a brain in a jar. And universities don't tend to like you doing it in less than 3 years because they can't charge so many years' fees. Put that together, that again is even a bit less than the master's funding. Therefore, it's utterly typical of the postgraduate experience that the postgraduate student will need to work to supplement their postgraduate funding. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you wanted to say anything about work before.
No, I just sort of agree with what you were saying. Without working, especially when I was a PhD student, I think I would have really struggled financially. So it was a good opportunity for me to top up my finances, to help me somewhat budget, as well as having the time to put my heart and soul in my studies as well.
Yeah, and the other thing I was probably going to say, at least about structures, was if you're going on to a postgraduate course at the same university as your undergraduate course, do look up whether there's any form of alumni discount. Staffs certainly is advertising that on its website. And of course, we hope you'll choose Staffs because we're ace. But each university will have a different deal on that. And the tip I've got here is no use to master's students because they will have standard start dates. But anyone thinking of a PhD, you can usually start a PhD at any time in the year. Do a bit of research on what the alumni discount will be and when it will change, if it changes. Often on something like the 1st of August, a new fee regime comes in, and if the alumni discount's shifting, you could find a doctoral student starting their course on August the 27th gets, for example, 25% off their fees. A postgraduate PhD student starting on the 2nd of September gets, for example, 15% off their fees. And I used the wrong dates there, I put them, but when August to September split, it is actually usually the 1st of August it switches over, but check individual websites. If you're starting a PhD, grill the university about what the discounts are and when they change with first enrolment dates.
Well, I'm a bit old enough to remember, or rather ancient enough to remember, when the only guaranteed funding you've got for postgraduate study was a career development loan, which is no longer with us. And students really did have to dig around for additional funding. So what sort of other funding is available that may not be coming directly from the government, but might be available to students?
Well, there, I suspect the thing probably I flag up most often is educational trusts, non-statutory funding. If you turn to us, have a very good website with a directory of educational grants. It's always a bit more in hope than expectation, because good old austerity Britain, as you can imagine, non-statutory funders will tend to get rather more applications than they can cope with. But you have jogged my memory there as well about an entirely different category. So far, I have not said a single thing about research councils. They are well worth looking at. They are well worth looking at well in advance of your studies, particularly if you are looking to start a doctorate. In general, they provide funding to universities for specific topics, and the university then provides the funding to the individual. So grill the faculty, talk to likely supervisors. Is there any research council funding? Because if there is, it's more generous than the postgraduate doctoral loan. Although the fly in the ointment is you can't have both at the same time. That might even make it worth shopping around universities. There are several universities that can supervise your PhD project. Which one's going to be best for me financially?
And universities, I believe, are particularly looking for people to do degrees by research, because research gets them more kudos in academic circles.
Oh, heavens, yes. And the networking opportunities between universities are quite special as well sometimes. So, yeah, universities do tend to be rather key.
Anything more to say, Aaron, about this? Have you got any?
No, other than that I was made aware of different fundings and that we'd applied for as a department instead of as an individual. Unfortunately, we were unable to get it. But that just means that you're going to have to be super shrewd with the actual application to make sure there's no every sort of gap has been filled. You present your argument well enough to make sure you've got the best chance of getting that funding.
It's certainly not an easy route, that's for sure. Well, thank you very much for actually enlightening us about the difficulties and the benefits of a postgraduate study. So thank you very much, Ralph, and thank you very much, Aaron. And thank you.